Gordon Ramsay. The name alone conjures images of fire, fury, and relentless perfection. But for 7 years behind the blazing temper and sharp critique, there was a private struggle that viewers never saw. Millions watched as he tore into failing restaurants on kitchen nightmares, reshaping kitchens, rebuilding staff morale, and turning disasters into dining experiences worth remembering. What no one knew was the toll it took on him. By 2014, after countless episodes, sleepless nights, and stomach-wrenching setbacks, Gordon made a decision that shocked fans and the television industry alike. He canceled his own show. For years, the reasons were hidden beneath ratings reports, media speculation, and network explanations. The American version alone had an 82% post-show closure rate, proof that even Gordon's expertise could not save every failing business. Behind the cameras, he battled resistant owners, repeated health risks, and a creeping sense of futility that gnawed at his pride. And then came one restaurant, remote, stubborn, and defiant, that became the tipping point. 7 years of devotion, confrontation, and heartbreak had led to this moment. Gordon Ramsay finally reveals the truth, and it is far more personal, complex, and human than anyone ever imagined. Gordon Ramsay had already carved his name into the culinary world long before cameras followed his every step. By the early 2000s, he was not just a chef, but a perfectionist, a visionary who demanded excellence at every turn. His restaurants were lauded, his standards uncompromising, and his reputation as a formidable force in the kitchen was cemented. Yet, few could have predicted that his fiery temperament, relentless pursuit of quality, and sharp tongue would one day become the cornerstone of a television phenomenon. In 2004, Kitchen Nightmares premiered in the United Kingdom, introducing viewers to a side of Gordon the public had never fully seen: raw, unfiltered, and emotionally unguarded. The premise was simple yet revolutionary. Struggling restaurants, some on the brink of closure, would invite Gordon into their kitchens, exposing the chaos behind the polished facades. With relentless honesty, he would confront failing menus, disorganized staff, and owners resistant to change. The drama unfolded not from scripted scenarios, but from real-life stakes: dreams on the line, livelihoods hanging by a thread, and a chef who refused to compromise on excellence. Audiences were captivated, not just by the transformations of the restaurants, but by the human stories hidden within each failing business. It was intimate, raw, and intensely human, a mirror to the struggles of anyone daring to chase their dreams. 3 years later, in 2007, Kitchen Nightmares crossed the Atlantic, premiering in the United States. The show exploded almost immediately. Viewers across the country were drawn to the intensity of Gordon's approach, the way he challenged complacent owners, held staff accountable, and refused to sugarcoat the truth. Ratings soared, and the show quickly became a staple of American reality television. Week after week, millions tuned in to watch the unfolding drama, the tension, and ultimately, the hope that even the most desperate kitchen could be salvaged. Recognition followed. The American version of Kitchen Nightmares earned multiple award nominations, including Best Reality Show recognition in 2008, 2009, and 2012. Gordon himself was nominated as Best Host by the Online Film and Television Association, a testament to the unique power of his presence on screen. But while accolades and public acclaim mounted, the hidden struggles behind the cameras quietly intensified. For Gordon, the job was never just entertainment, it was deeply personal. Every episode was an emotional investment, a test of patience, and a confrontation with human flaws. The success that seemed effortless to viewers masked an immense pressure to deliver not just television but genuine transformation. The early triumphs, though intoxicating, came with their own shadows. While the show offered hope to failing businesses, it also exposed Gordon to a relentless cycle of disappointment. Owners resisted change, staff dynamics resisted control, and the emotional burden of witnessing failure weighed heavily. Yet, the public only saw the spectacle. The dramatic makeovers, the shouting, the tears, the triumphs. Few understood the depth of commitment required, the personal cost, or the sleepless nights spent worrying whether the changes would last. The human stakes were as high as the culinary ones, and for Gordon, the failure of a single restaurant felt like a personal defeat, an echo against a lifetime dedicated to excellence. By the time Kitchen Nightmares reached its peak in the United States, the show had become more than a television program. It was a cultural touchstone, a testament to the fragile balance between ambition and reality. Gordon Ramsay was no longer just a chef. He had become a symbol of dedication, an emissary of accountability, and a mirror reflecting both the potential and the fragility of human endeavor. Yet beneath the success, behind the accolades, and beneath the public persona, the seeds of exhaustion, frustration, and doubt were quietly taking root, seeds that would years later shape one of the most shocking decisions of his career. For Gordon Ramsay, the public face of Kitchen Nightmares, the shouting, the criticism, the fiery confrontations, was only part of the story. Behind the cameras, the reality was far more exhausting, far more human, and far more taxing than anyone could have imagined. Every restaurant that Gordon entered carried its own unseen weight, personal struggles, financial despair, staff dysfunction, and owners clinging to habits that had brought them to the brink. Each week he carried not only the responsibility of guiding the kitchen, but also the burden of confronting the emotional, psychological, and sometimes moral complexities of the people running these businesses. By 2014, the cumulative effect of this work was undeniable. Gordon later revealed that he had suffered multiple episodes of food poisoning while filming, a stark reminder of the physical dangers inherent in visiting failing restaurants. Beyond illness, there were sleepless nights spent worrying about whether the interventions would last, whether owners would actually implement the changes, or whether the businesses would crumble despite his guidance. For a perfectionist like Gordon, watching failure repeat itself week after week was not just professionally frustrating, it was deeply personal. The statistics painted a stark picture. According to reality television updates, 82% of the American restaurants featured on Kitchen Nightmares eventually closed their doors. Out of every 10 restaurants he tried to save, only 2 remained in operation years later. For someone who had built his career on discipline, skill, and unwavering standards, these numbers were devastating. It was a sobering reminder that no amount of culinary expertise or managerial advice could always overcome the deep-rooted challenges that plagued struggling restaurants. Yet the challenge was rarely just about menus or staffing. Gordon encountered owners whose motivations were often misaligned with the show's intent. Some seemed more interested in publicity than in transformation, performing for the cameras while ignoring the real work required. Others simply lacked the temperament, skills, or integrity to run a sustainable business, no matter how much guidance they received. Each encounter demanded patience, diplomacy, and resilience, qualities tested daily in high-pressure, emotionally charged environments. The toll on Gordon was both professional and deeply personal. He described the emotional exhaustion of investing in restaurants that, despite his best efforts, would ultimately fail. The frustration of trying to save businesses while contending with resistant or indifferent owners gnawed at his sense of purpose. Beyond the heat of the kitchen and the drama captured on screen, Gordon was confronting an emotional reality few viewers ever saw: the repeated heartbreak of human failure, the despair of knowing that even his best efforts could not always change outcomes, and the anxiety of maintaining his own standards in the face of relentless disappointment. And then there was the breaking point. Among the hundreds of restaurants he visited, one experience in particular stood out: a remote ski resort in southern France, where the owner's attitude went beyond resistance to outright defiance. It was here that Gordon was confronted with deliberate neglect, greed, and a refusal to embrace the changes he offered. The emotional and ethical challenge of working with someone so unwilling to evolve became a defining moment. It crystallized years of frustration, disappointment, and physical strain into a single undeniable realization: the work he was doing on Kitchen Nightmares was no longer sustainable. By the time he walked away from the show, Gordon had accumulated more than professional expertise. He carried the scars of 7 years of relentless confrontation with human imperfection, business failure, and his own limits. The rawness, intensity, and humanity of these experiences were invisible to audiences captivated by televised drama. Yet it was these hidden battles, every moment of anger, every sleepless night, every personal sacrifice, that shaped his ultimate decision to cancel the show. In truth, the story of Kitchen Nightmares is as much about Gordon Ramsay as it is about the restaurants he sought to save. The toll it took on him, physically, emotionally, and morally, reveals a side of celebrity and television seldom acknowledged: the human cost behind entertainment, the fragility behind mastery, and the quiet heartbreak of a man who gave everything he had to save others' dreams. The turning point came in a place that looked, at first glance, almost too beautiful to be associated with crisis: a ski resort tucked into the slopes of southern France. Surrounded by crisp mountain air, fresh snow, and postcard-worthy scenery, the location might have suggested tranquility. But inside the resort's restaurant, Gordon Ramsay faced one of the most troubling situations of his entire career. The problem was not just poor management or struggling finances. It was something far more difficult to confront: a complete disregard for responsibility, accountability, and the basic ethics of running a business that served the public. From the moment he arrived, Gordon could sense the tension. The owner's attitude was defensive, dismissive, and dismissively proud of it. Instead of accepting guidance or acknowledging the severity of the restaurant's issues, he met each suggestion with arrogance. The kitchen reflected that indifference: neglected equipment, questionable food practices, and a lack of genuine concern for guests who trusted the establishment with their safety. This was not the typical dysfunction Gordon had seen in other failing restaurants. It was a deliberate refusal to care, a stubbornness that reached deeper than poor training or overwhelmed staff. For years, Gordon had walked into disaster zones and found hope beneath the rubble. He had seen owners break down in tears, admitting their fears and failures. He had watched families try desperately to hold onto dreams built from savings, sacrifice, and faith. Even when tempers flared, there was usually a thread of humanity he could pull, something that reassured him the fight was worth it. But here, in that remote French resort, the thread wasn't there. The owner's resistance wasn't fear or lack of skill. It was pride, ego, and a refusal to change. The deeper Gordon looked, the more troubling the situation became. Food was mishandled. Standards were ignored, and the explanations offered were never sincere, never grounded in a desire to improve. Each attempt he made to break through the owner's defenses was met with the same wall of indifference, a kind of careless confidence that placed profits above people. For Gordon, who had spent a lifetime championing integrity in food, the experience was profoundly unsettling. As filming continued, the emotional weight grew heavier. Gordon wasn't simply confronting incompetence. He was confronting a mindset that endangered guests and demeaned the craft he had spent his life upholding. The disconnect between the owner's behavior and the responsibility of running a restaurant pushed him into unfamiliar territory. For the first time, he questioned whether his presence could make any difference at all. And then came the moment that would stay with him for years. After repeated attempts to guide, educate, and intervene, Gordon realized he could not continue. He could not endorse a business that refused to change, nor could he risk being associated with practices that violated the very principles he stood for. Standing in the cold mountain air outside that troubled resort, Gordon made a decision that cut deeper than viewers ever knew. He walked away from the episode. It was the only time in the history of the entire franchise that he chose not to finish the intervention. That experience did not remain isolated, it lingered. The resort was the final straw in a long line of emotional, physical, and ethical challenges accumulated over 7 intense years. It forced Gordon to confront a truth he had tried to push aside. that despite his dedication, his passion, and his resolve, some environments were beyond saving. The realization was painful, but it was honest. The French ski resort episode became the moment that crystallized years of strain. It was the clearest sign that Kitchen Nightmares had reached a point where continuing meant compromising his values and risking the integrity he had fought his entire life to protect. And for Gordon, that was a line he could not cross, not even for a show that millions loved. When Gordon Ramsay announced in 2014 that Kitchen Nightmares was coming to an end, it felt abrupt to the world, but not to him. The decision did not arrive in a burst of frustration or an impulsive reaction to a single episode. It was the result of years of carrying emotional weight, pushing against resistance, and pouring every ounce of himself into restaurants that often collapsed long after the cameras stopped rolling. Behind the scenes, he had absorbed the disappointment of each closure, each setback, each owner who refused to change. Walking away was not a moment of anger, it was an act of honesty. In interviews, Gordon explained the reality of the process. Filming required total immersion. Each location demanded complete emotional and physical commitment. He had to face failing kitchens, broken systems, and owners wrestling with fear, denial, and pride. The long hours were filled with pressure, conflict, and the unrelenting responsibility to rebuild trust in restaurants that had lost it. Week after week, year after year, the strain accumulated. And beyond the transformations captured on screen, the numbers told a harder truth. The majority of the American restaurants, 82%, eventually shut their doors. For Gordon, those failures were not statistics. They were people, families who had invited him into their dreams, staff members who depended on the business for stability, and communities that hoped for revival. Even when he knew he had done all he could, he carried the weight of outcomes he could not control. That burden grew heavier as the seasons continued. The emotional intensity that viewers found gripping was the same intensity that left Gordon drained, questioning the sustainability of continuing the journey. By the time he made the decision to cancel the show, he had already recognized the toll it was taking on his well-being. He had endured multiple bouts of food poisoning from unsafe kitchens. He had stood in cramped, sweltering spaces for hours, trying to restore order where chaos had taken root. And he had navigated countless confrontations with owners who were either overwhelmed, resistant, or simply unwilling to accept the changes required to survive. Each episode demanded resilience, but resilience has limits, even for someone as driven as Gordon. The show's success did not make the choice easier. Kitchen Nightmares had become a cultural fixture, embraced by audiences in the United Kingdom and the United States. It had earned award nominations, high viewership, and a place in the landscape of reality television. People admired Gordon's intensity, his honesty, and his capacity to turn failing businesses around. But public acclaim could not diminish the private reality, a reality shaped by sleepless nights, emotional exhaustion, and the knowledge that many transformations were temporary. When Gordon spoke about ending the series, he did so with clarity and calm. He explained that he needed space to breathe, to protect his health, and to focus on projects where he felt he could make lasting impact. He emphasized that the show had given him extraordinary insight into the struggles of small businesses, the resilience of workers, and the hopes carried by families risking everything. But he also acknowledged that continuing meant stretching himself beyond what was reasonable, and after 7 demanding years, that was something he could no longer justify. Ending Kitchen Nightmares was not a retreat. It was an acknowledgement of the limits of even the most determined effort. It was a decision rooted in integrity, respect for the craft, and an understanding that stepping back was necessary for his own well-being. It marked the close of a chapter defined by intensity, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to helping others find their way. And though the cameras stopped, the experience left an indelible imprint on him, one shaped by humanity, struggle, and the courage to walk away when the cost became too high. When Gordon Ramsay stepped away from Kitchen Nightmares, He didn't just close the door on a television series, he stepped back into himself. After 7 demanding years, the quiet that followed allowed him to reflect on what the journey had meant, not only to the restaurants he fought to save, but to the people who watched him transform desperate spaces into something hopeful. The impact was larger than ratings or awards could capture. It lived in the thousands of viewers who saw their own struggles reflected in the kitchens he walked into, in the resilience he inspired, and in the honesty that defined every moment he spent on screen. In his reflections, Gordon often returned to the idea of mentorship, how guiding others had shaped him as much as it shaped the people he helped. Long before cameras entered his world, mentorship had been central to his own life. He learned from chefs who pushed him relentlessly, who saw potential in him before he saw it in himself. On Kitchen Nightmares, he paid that forward. Each episode became a reminder that teaching wasn't only about technique or discipline, it was about listening, understanding, and sometimes carrying another person's hope when they had none left. That human connection is what stayed with him the most. His family played a quiet but meaningful role throughout the process. Gordon spoke openly about how they grounded him, offering balance when the emotional strain of the show felt overwhelming. Their presence reminded him that his identity stretched far beyond the walls of any kitchen. In the years after ending Kitchen Nightmares, that grounding became essential. He shifted his focus toward projects that allowed for more stability, more creativity, and more time with the people who meant the most to him. It was a return to the foundations that had shaped his life long before he became a public figure. The cultural impact of Kitchen Nightmares continued long after the final episode aired. Viewers remembered the rawness, the vulnerability, the sharp truths that Gordon delivered with equal parts discipline and compassion. The show became a reference point in conversations about perseverance and accountability, much like the way long-running television partnerships, such as the Guinness-recognized duo of game show hosts Pat Sajak and Vanna White, became symbols of endurance in another corner of television history. Though the formats differed, the comparison underscored the lasting footprint Kitchen Nightmares left on its genre. Restaurants closed, others survived, some thrived beyond expectation. But the numbers didn't define the show's legacy. What mattered was the humanity captured within each episode. The way Gordon looked at failing businesses not as spectacles, but as lives intertwined with dreams, fear, and responsibility. His willingness to confront uncomfortable truths created a blueprint for authenticity in reality television, one that influenced countless shows that followed. Audiences were drawn not just to the confrontations, but to the transformation, the moment when an owner realized they still had something worth fighting for. When the final episode aired, Gordon ended not with theatrics but with gratitude. He thanked the staff who worked alongside him, the contestants who trusted him with their vulnerabilities, and the viewers who embraced the journey from beginning to end. It was a quiet, heartfelt moment, one that echoed the sincerity that had carried him through every challenge. He acknowledged that while he couldn't save every restaurant, he had given each one unwavering commitment, and that, in its own way, was enough. In the years that followed, Kitchen Nightmares remained a testament to Gordon Ramsay's resilience and humanity. It showed a man determined to lift others, even when the weight of their circumstances pressed heavily on him. It revealed the emotional truth behind a television icon, the exhaustion, the compassion, and the lasting desire to make a difference. And though he stepped away, the impact endured, woven into the memories of those who watched him fight, teach, and care with unfiltered honesty. When Gordon Ramsay stepped away from Kitchen Nightmares, he carried with him the quiet weight of everything those 7 years had revealed. About people, about perseverance, and about the limits of even the most determined heart. His departure was not an ending born of defeat, but an acknowledgement of humanity's complexity, and the courage it takes to recognize when a chapter has run its course. Through every kitchen he entered and every confrontation he faced, Gordon offered something deeper than guidance. He offered honesty, compassion, and a willingness to stand beside others at their most vulnerable. The legacy of his work lived on long after the cameras stopped rolling. Viewers remembered the raw truths, the emotional turning points, and the glimpses of hope he restored in places others had written off. And in stepping away, he reminded the world that strength is not measured by how long someone can endure, but by knowing when to reclaim peace, purpose, and balance. His journey left a lasting imprint, not through perfection, but through humanity. For more emotional stories, check out this video.